Hey, good morning. Welcome to Faith on Hill's online Sunday morning service. We gather together every Sunday morning at 10:30 a.m., both online and in person. Now, I don't know how you're connecting with us this morning. We have our podcasts and everything available online at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. You just have to search Faith on Hill Church. You can go on our website, faithonhill.com. That's where we have our live Sunday stream, calendar information. Sometimes there's a blog post up there. And if you want to support the work that God is doing here at the church, you can go to our giving tab and you can go through that process and support what God's doing here. Like, oh man, another church just asking for money. If you've been with us for a while, you know that we don't make a big deal about money. I don't talk about it like, in fact, there's people in the church that think I should talk about it more. So every so often we mention it. It's there for you if you want it. All right. Now, in person, we gather at our building on Hill Road. We have kids' church Sunday mornings. We have youth group that meets at the building on Tuesday nights, but there's no youth group in the month of August. So for the month of August, no youth group, but then they'll be back on in September. We have gathered together for prayer, for song, and the study of God's Word. So that happens at 10:30 a.m. at our building on Hill Road on Sunday mornings. And then, online, you can follow us at Faith on Hill on social media and faithonhill.com. All right, we are going to be in Judges chapter 8 this morning. We're going to continue the story of Gideon. All right, so Gideon and his men won this great battle. The Lord used Gideon and 300 men to defeat the armies of the Midianites, the Amalekites, and their allies, and lead them into chaos and a sort of, what they call a rout, being defeated and on the run. And they called all the other guys who God had originally sent away, several to tens of thousands of fighters. Hey, we need you back here. It's time. And so they all come and they join the battle, and they send messengers to Ephraim. And they say, hey, can you go down? They're going to try to cross the Jordan River down by you guys, but if you can go block them off and take them out at that choke point, and then we'll hit them from the other side, and we'll hit them from two sides. And they have great victory. Now, chapter 8, verse 1, the Ephraimites ask Gideon, why have you treated us like this? Why didn't you call us when you went to fight Midian? And they challenged him vigorously. Now, if you go back to chapter 6, when Gideon sent messengers to call out the army to fight, he sent messengers all around Manasseh. That was his tribe, geographically the largest of the northern tribes. He also sent messengers to Asher and Naphtali and Dan, these other northern tribes. He did not send a messenger to the tribe of Ephraim. We don't know why. We aren't told why. But Gideon responds, what have I accomplished compared to you? Aren't the gleanings of Ephraim's grapes better than the full harvest of Abiezer? God gave Oreb and Zeb, the Midianite leaders, into your hands. What was I able to do compared to you? And at this, their resentment against him subsided. Now, again, we're not told why Gideon didn't call them out. Maybe it was an oversight. That happens. We've all done that, right? We've put together the list, the invites for a barbecue, a family party, something, and you just forget to invite somebody, and it's not personal. It just happened. Maybe it was because the Ephraimites had not come out before. Maybe there had been a previous time where the call had gone out and they hadn't shown up. We're not sure what happened, but Gideon just used a little bit of diplomacy, and it was kind of like, hey guys, you guys had such a greater victory. Why are you even complaining? And so he's using a little bit of just tact and diplomacy, and that's wise on his part. So then Gideon and his 300 men were exhausted, yet they kept up the pursuit, and they came to the Jordan and crossed it. And he said to the men of Succoth, give my troops some bread. They are worn out, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. But the officials of Succoth said, do you already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your troops? So what they are saying is, hey, if we support you and your 300 tired and haggard men, and you lose, they will come back and they will enact punishment on us. Now, we've read before that the people of Israel, when the Midianites came, they would go and hide in the cliffs and the caves and the mountains. Why are these people in this town? It's not unreasonable to assume that they had cut a deal. Succoth is in the very east of Israel, the eastern tribe of Dan. these tribes were historically the ones that succumbed first to idolatry, to paganism, and to invasion. I'm going to guess that they cut a deal. I'm going to guess that the reason that they felt safe and secure in their city was that they had so given themselves over that they were not oppressed in the same way. And now Gideon's come and saying, hey, we've had victory and now we're chasing these other guys. We just need a little support. We're not even asking you to come fight. Just give us some bread. And they said, nope. If you lose, they'll come back and they will make us pay for helping you. So then Gideon replied, just for that, when Yahweh has given Zebah and Zalmunna in my hand, I will tear your flesh with desert thorns and briars. And there he went up to Peniel, and he made the same request of them, but they answered as the men of Succoth had. So he said to the men of Peniel, when I return in triumph, I will tear down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were at Karkor with a force of about 15,000 men, all that were left of the armies of the eastern people, 120,000 swordsmen had fallen. So Gideon had started this victory with 300. 120,000 of their enemies had fallen. Now, granted, tens of thousands had joined them in the pursuit. But Gideon and his 300 men had stayed hot on the trail. The men of Ephraim stayed where they had fought. It seems like Gideon and his men were the ones who were still fighting at the end of all of this. And there's still 15,000 left. And Gideon went up by the route of the nomads east of Moab and Jobekah, I can't say that right, and attacked the unsuspecting army. And Zebah and Zalmunna, the two kings of Midian, fled, but he pursued them and captured them, routing their entire army. Gideon, son of Joash, then returned from battle by the pass of Heres. He caught a young man of Succoth and questioned him. And the young man wrote down for him the names of the 77 officials of Succoth, the elders of the town. And then Gideon came and said to the men of Succoth, here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you taunted me by saying, do you not already have the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna in your possession? Why should we give bread to your exhausted men? And he took the elders of the town, and he taught the men of Succoth a lesson, punishing them with desert thorns and briars. And then he also pulled down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the town. Then he asked Zebah and Zalmunna, what kind of men did you kill at Tabor? Men like you, they answered, each one with the bearing of a prince. Gideon answered, those were my brothers, the sons of my own mother. And as surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared their lives, I would not kill you. And turning to Jether, his eldest son, he said, kill them. But Jether did not draw his sword because he was only a boy and was afraid. And Zebah and Zalmunna said, come do it yourself. As is the man, so is the strength. And so Gideon stepped forward and killed them and took the ornaments off their camels' necks. So this is really brutal. Things of a different time and a different culture. Ones on which I am not interested in passing judgment or comment on, because certainly and surely they might look at us and pass comment and judgment on how we live. And we might say, what are you talking about? You had such violence. And they would say, oh, yes, but you have such idolatry and such wealth and people go hungry and you have this and that. And they would be right. And so we would just say that they lived in violent times. We would say that Gideon was trying to restore some sense of justice. Maybe he wasn't going about it the right way. Maybe he should have done things differently. I don't know. But we can see intention there. Now Gideon tries to get his son, who it seems is too young for the task, to kill these men. It seems that Gideon was his son was too young to win fame in battle, but he was there. And so Gideon was trying to get his son to earn some renown for himself. And he's unable to do it, so Gideon does the job instead. The Israelites said to Gideon, rule over us, your son and your grandsons, because you have saved us from the hands of Midian. But Gideon told them, I will not rule over you, nor any of my sons rule over you. The Lord will rule over you. So he's saying, we have never had a king. We aren't supposed to have a king. God is supposed to rule over us. We've been delivered from our oppressors. Why would we turn from God? So he's challenging them to this. It's also possible, as we will see later in the chapter, that Gideon had a little bit of wisdom going on, realizing that this offer might not have been all that it seemed. That Israel, while they did not want God to rule over them, they were also not ready for anyone else to rule over them. The refrain that we will see soon in the book is everyone did what was right in their own eyes. But Gideon said, one thing I do request is that you give me an earring from your share of the plunder, because it was the custom of the Ishmaelites to wear gold earrings. So he basically said, hey, after the battle was over, you went around, you took the gold earring off the dead, and you've all got a bunch of them. I'm just asking each of you give me one. And they answered, we will be glad to give them. And so they spread out a garment, and each of them threw a ring from his plunder onto it. And the weight of the gold he asked for came in at over 1,700 shekels, and that's about 43 pounds of gold, not counting the ornaments, the pennants, the purple garnets worn by the king of Midian, or the chains on their camels' necks. So not counting Gideon's personal plunder, he got 43 pounds of gold from the rest of the army. And Gideon made the gold into an ephod, and he placed it in Orpha, his town. And all Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. I don't know whether Gideon should have asked for this gold or not. We don't see Deborah or Barak doing that when they had great victory over those who were oppressing Israel. We don't see other judges in the book do that, and yet he did. I don't know whether he should have or not. I don't have an answer. What I do know, it's not so much what he had, it's what he did with it. Did he use the great wealth he got to help rebuild the nation? The nation of Israel was destitute. This plunder that the army received would have helped them rebuild their towns, their cities, their crops, go with traders and buy new livestock and new seed and supply, new metal and things to build plows and axes and all of these things that a society of that era would have needed. This would have been a blessing and a benefit to all of the people. What did he do? He took the gold and he made it into an ephod. An ephod was a garment that the priest wore. It was a priestly garment, and it was supposed to be made of linen, and there was a breastplate that the high priest wore with some gemstones, one for each tribe of Israel. It was not something that Gideon should have even had. The priest was only to have it, and it wasn't even theirs, it was the Lord's. And yet he did this thing, and then he put it in his town. And then people, because people hadn't changed, you see, Gideon had tore down their idols, but they were still idolatrous. And now there's a new idol to come before. Oh, it's okay. It's not Baal. It's not Asherah. It's an ephod of Yahweh. It's an ephod, just like the priest wears. And we'll come and we'll say our prayers here instead of going to the tabernacle where we should go. And it became a snare. The people prostituted themselves there. It's not unreasonable by the use of the word to think that they brought their own pagan practices in and involved it with it, that this wealth that Gideon got actually ended up being a curse to his family. And thus the Midianites, verse 28, were subdued before Israel and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace for 40 years. Jerubbaal, son of Joash, went home to live, and he had 70 sons of his own, for he had many wives. His concubine, who lived in Shechem, also bore him a son, whom he named Abimelech. Gideon, son of Joash, died at good old age and was buried at the tomb of his father Joash in Orpha of the Abiezrites. No sooner had Gideon died than that the Israelites prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-berith as their god and did not remember Yahweh their God, who had rescued them from the hands of their enemies on every side. They also failed to show any loyalty to the family of Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, in spite of all the good things he had done for them. We don't know what that means exactly, no loyalty. Again, it might mean that Gideon knew better than most that the offer of being king was a hollow one. It's also possible that Gideon's family was calling them back to worshiping God as the idols of Baal were being established, and they could have cared less. Who cares what your family did for us? We don't care. Gideon had many wives and a concubine. You know, right now in the city of Dallas, Texas, and I'm sure this is happening sadly elsewhere, but in the city of Dallas, it's very notable. There's all kinds of mega churches and big churches everywhere. And in Dallas, church after church, prominent church, well-known church, internationally known church, has had scandal after scandal after scandal as leader after leader has been forced to resign. The leader, the pastor, founding pastor of one of the biggest, most influential churches in America, Robert Morris, had to resign because it turned out that he had been hiding grave criminal sin. And he had to step down. And there's been this idea that's gone around, the gold, the glory, or the girls. And there's some truth to that Gideon was snared by the gold and he was snared by the girls. He was snared. Now, he had enough money in that culture, not the Jewish culture. That's not how it was supposed to be, but in the culture of everyone else around them. And remember, they were still living like everyone else around them. In the culture of everyone else around them, he had enough money that he could just take as many wives as he could afford, and he could afford a lot. He could afford to feed all of these kids because he had so much wealth. And his wealth, instead of using it for the benefit of others, the blessing of others, became a snare because it allowed him a lifestyle of sin. Right now in America, we are wealthy people. We may not feel that way, but we're the world's 1%. And you do see that where people their wealth allows them. Their seeking of their own glory, of their own desire, leads them to idolatry, to rejecting God. Even people who are church-going people, Gideon and his family tore down the false idols, and when he had something made, it was an ephod, something to worship God with, right? Supposedly. And yet people are so committed to their own ways that we won't submit ourselves to God's ways. We won't reject the idolatry that is so prevalent. Right now, look, I don't know what to tell you about, there's been this whole thing online about the Olympic opening ceremony. And if you were offended by that, I don't think you were wrong to be offended by that. I think personally, it seems pretty clear that at least in part, it was supposed to evoke the Last Supper. At the same time, there are those who have said, hey, why are you so offended by this? But story after story of abuse and corruption in the Church of Jesus here in America, and you seem to be silent. Another thing I've seen online a lot this last week has been discussion of a new book. And this new book talks about the corruption of the church, how left-wing politics and money have supposedly influenced and bought off pastors and pulpits of influential churches across the country, without any sort of self-awareness about what if the same is true the other way, that money and power and influence have bought off pastors and pulpits from the political right of the country. The idolatries of this world, the ideologies of this world are trying to trap and ensnare us. And people say, oh, we want to follow God, but it's hollow. Oh, Gideon, we'll make you our king. But it showed that they didn't really want to. They showed no loyalty to his family, in spite of all the good that he had done for them. We say we want these things. We're going to tear down the Baals, tear down the Asherahs, but then we put up the gold ephod. We're all going to get together. We're going to fight the good fight, and then Sukkoth won't supply the army, and Ephraim comes to battle, but then they start causing trouble. The divisions and the unity, the disunity of this world, it is prevalent. It is rampant. And the church is all too often sucked in. And I am worried that we are about to see a split in the church, a division in the church that may be unavoidable. And I believe it stems from idolatry. I believe it stems from an idolatry to ourselves, an idolatry to human ideology, an idolatry to politics, an idolatry to polarization. And you say, well, where are you getting that from? Did you know that there have been studies that show that most people pick their ideology or their politics first and then pick their church. They don't go to the church and then say, Lord, show me my ideology based from you. Show me how I should think or live or practice or move from your word. No, they have that all figured out, and then they find a church that'll tell them what they already believe. That's idolatry. And I know I'm not going to win any friends or fans by saying that, but it's idolatry. It's idolatry to seek glory, and that's what people do. We seek glory and power from being on a certain side or tribe or winning team and dividing ourselves. And I see so much going on here in Gideon's story as I see going on in the world around us, including in our own community. And it will lead to pain that we don't need to have. Just like Gideon tore down the idols and called people to repent. Just like Gideon called the men of the city, hey, join, be part of this. Just like Gideon said to the people, hey, I'm not going to rule over you. We will be ruled by God. Did Gideon do everything right? No. But among his generation, he was just doing the best he could. And we might not be doing everything right. We may not have it all figured out. But we can take what we have and we can do the best we can with it and say, Lord, help us where we've got this wrong. Lord, help us in our weakness. Lord, help us in our failings. And we can just say, as for us and who we are, we will serve the Lord. That's what I got. God bless you. I hope you have a fantastic week. I'm not in person at church this week. I'm on vacation. This is an online-only sermon. So I look forward to being back in person next Sunday and then online, of course, next Sunday as well. We'll see you again next time. God bless you.